Shalom, 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 shalom. I'd like to first and foremost start by giving infinite praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rachal Kudash. I'd like to say Shalom, Wa'ashem, Kabag, Wala Rakab, Sequoyim Nawa, Wahashala Yakim Nawa, which of course is double honors to our elders and the apostles of the great millstone. And Shalom, Wa Barakim, La Bakaryam, Shaw, Yasha Allah, which is peace and blessings unto the elect. I'm the brother Dawadah from the DC Church. Back with another short lesson through the spirit and power, Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. And as you can see, I have an article here, and this is entitled, this is from, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Axios, if I'm saying that right. It's a news outlet, and it says 6 reasons the U.S. and Iran are on the brink of war. Really, before I even, clicked on that article, I just put U.S. versus Iran war. Because as we all know, you had things heating up between the U.S. Really, it's Israel and Iran. But anytime Israel is within a conflict, of course, the U.S. gets dragged into it because the U.S. essentially is ran by it, and it's like you can't even say it because you'll get clipped. But, it's ran by the small hats, man. When you look at these major lobbyists like AIPAC, they're the ones who really hold a lot of control. A lot of the politicians or, a lot of the congressmen, most of them have dual citizenship. All right. Nonetheless, this is not even about that. This is more so about the conflict that's going on between, Babylon, all right, aka United States of America, and Iran. All right. And the reason why this is so important because these are 2 major players in prophecy, all right, in biblical prophecy, all right, which we're going to get into, okay? So you have the conflict stirring up between Iran and the United States. And another reason, why this is important, even on a, geopolitical basis, is because between Iran, you have the strait, what's called the Strait of Hormuz, all right, which a lot of oil tankers go in and go out to, basically transport oil to different parts of the world. Now, that transport, makes up about 30% of, of the world's, of global oil exports. So if that 30% gets cut off, that's going to send oil prices through the roof, making it more expensive, for things like transportation and things like energy. You see, so major things taking place, major things going on. And of course, as prophets, we're on our job to watch what's taking place and to report on these things. All right. So it says 6 reasons. All right. And of course, it's going to have the number 6, number of a man, as Esau. But it says 6 reasons the U.S. and Iran are on the brink of war. Okay. So it says major, man. It says a war between the United States and Iran is looming, and there are several factors suggesting that President Trump might push the button soon. All right. And that's what we're waiting for. As prophets, we looking to the side. We got our popcorn. We watching this movie that the Lord has set up, and we just waiting. We're waiting patiently, all right, for the Lord to put the battery in the backs, all right, of these different kings of the world, all right, for them to just go full throttle with it. All right. So it says the big picture. Trump has been trying to strike a nuclear deal with Iran since he retook the White House last year. But after abandoning a previous round of talks and ordering strikes last June, Trump may be about to repeat that pattern at a larger, it says on a larger scale. Okay. So it says any potential war could resemble a full-scale campaign and looks less like the pinpoint operation in Venezuela. Okay. It says this will have major implications on the Middle East and in the remaining 3 years of Trump's presidency. All right. Reality check. There's still a chance of diplomacy prevails at this time around. All right. Which is looking pretty bleak for that, to take place. All right. For diplomacy to happen because these nations are just completely fed up. All right. Russia, Iran, China. Okay, all of these nations totally condemn the actions that America has taken especially against Venezuela, and all of the actions that they have taken just in general, all right, throughout the world to enforce their, hegemon. So it says long-lasting nuclear dispute. This is the first reason. So the U.S. and Iran, it says have had off and on talks about striking nuclear deals for months. All right, it says successive U.S. administrative have vowed to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Okay, it says former President Obama struck a deal in 2015 aimed at doing just that, but Trump abandoned it during his first term in favor of maximum pressure approach. It says former President Biden was unable to negotiate a new agreement. Trump returned to office, also wanting a deal. Okay, so here it is. They're saying that the same old story. Israel points the finger, says Iran has all of these weapons of mass destruction, just like they did before with what's his name? I forget the guy's name that they said had weapons. I think it was Saddam Hussein. Who they say had weapons of mass destruction. Next thing you know, America is in, or United States is in a years, decades long war, all right, with Afghanistan to quote unquote diminish these weapons of mass destruction. And there was never any weapons of mass destruction. Really, the country that does obtain weapons of mass destruction that isn't supposed to is Israel. And they refuse to disclose that fact. You see, they never comment on it because they know it's true. They know they do have, they do have those weapons, but they're not going to say so. But it says after Trump's 60-day deadline for Israel to reach a new nuclear deal with the United States passed in June, Israel attacked Iran. It says the United States joined Israel's fight days later and bombed Iran's underground nuclear facilities. It says Trump later returned to pushing Iran to make a deal. So it says, state of play, Trump has repeatedly said he wants a new nuclear deal with Tehran. Tehran is the capital of Iran, if brothers didn't know. And it says, but the president and his allies have at times also suggested they would like to see regime change, suggesting a new military operation go well beyond nuclear targets. So really what they want to see is, they want to insert their puppet leadership into Iran so that things work out more favorable for them. Just like they have puppet leaderships in a lot of those Middle Eastern countries, over there in the Middle East. All right. So it says the protesting. All right. The protester killings. It says Trump came close to striking Iran in early January over killing of thousands of protesters by the Iranian regime. Now, you got to ask yourself the question, why in the hell does the United States of American president care about, these quote-unquote protesters being killed in Iran, all right, which has absolutely nothing to do with the United States, all right? That's how you know this is all really just propaganda so that he has some type of basis or premise to fulfill his agenda, which his agenda is to import, his regime change, to insert that puppet leadership. All right. But really, this is all just going to lead up to the conflicts that are going to lead into WW3. OK, you still have Russia over there fighting against Ukraine. You still have Ukraine being backed by the United States of America. All right. Because a lot of the things that they're being supplied are, weaponry, all right, money, billions of dollars is being funneled or are being funneled into, to Ukraine. All right, so there's a lot of things going on geopolitically, all right, that clearly let us know that we're in the last of the last days. All right, this is all a part of prophecy, okay, which we're going to get into. That's why you see I got Ezekiel, the 39th chapter up here. All right, really both chapters go into it, 30, 38, and 39. But I'm going to tap a little bit more on 39, since brothers, we mostly go into 38. But I'm going to tap a little bit more into Ezekiel, the 39th chapter. So it says, Trump threatened to hit Iran if they kill protesters. We are locked and loaded and ready to go, he said. All right, security forces cracked down with many reports putting the death toll in the thousands. All right, it says the regime also blocked the internet access to its citizens and have closed its airspace. Okay, so I'm gonna jump down a little bit. The Chekhov's aircraft carriers. It says having made repeated threats against the Iranian regime and then sent two air carriers to the region. Trump has created enormous expectations globally that he will strike Iran if he can't swiftly secure a deal. You see? And also, you had some other politicians, I forget the guy's name, but he was basically saying like, we don't have all of those what do you call it? Those aircraft carriers over there for no reason. All right. Now, if you don't know what an aircraft carrier is, it's basically a large ship that's able to literally carry multiple aircrafts that's used for, of course, military purposes. All right. And so they're sending those aircraft carriers over there, okay, to prepare for a strike, just like they did with Venezuela. Right before they struck on Venezuela, you had all of those aircraft surrounding the border of Caracas, all right, which is the capital, okay. So it says it's a bit like Chekhov's gun. Typically, you don't move two aircraft carriers and hundreds of aircrafts into position unless you plan to use them, and that's right, and they do plan to use them, okay, and they will be used sooner or later, okay, or should I say sooner than later, okay. So it says the Israeli government is preparing for war and advocating for comprehensive operations. It says far beyond a pinprick strikes Trump considered back in January. You see? It says officials from both countries expect much broader U.S.-Israeli campaign than one last June. All right. Excuse me. All right. So I'm going to jump down. I'm going to get to the point. The oil factor is number 5. That's the fifth reason. It says the current oil market may offer a strategic window for Trump to strike Iran. Markets are well supplied. Prices are relatively low. Demand growth is modest, and Iran's proxy capabilities are weakened. Okay, so and that was another reason why strategically they made that move on Venezuela before striking Iran, because and all of this is being propagated by the small hats. I gotta say that, man. Esau is behind all of this shit, and chiefly, namely the chief of Edom, which is Amalek. All right, the damn small hats. They're the ones who's behind all of this. They're pulling the strings in America, telling Trump what to do. He's basically following their orders. All right, and that's what's happening. That's what we see going on. So they understand Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world. So they wanted to get their hands on that oil. So what they do? They pulled a crazy move by removing the president. You see? So now they got control of the oil. They being, America. Okay? Which that oil, they don't even have the infrastructure to, extract, to extract certain, aspects of the oil. All right? They're saying that with the infrastructure they do have, all they can get is mostly diesel. You see? Nonetheless, jumping back to this, all right, it says prices would have jumped. Prices would jump a lot if a strike happened, but the rise would be likely limited in dollar and duration if no barrels are actually lost, or even if Iran's exports are disrupted. It says, flashback, the Strait of Hormuz is the transit point for about 1/5 of global oil trade. So that's 20%. What did I say? I think I said 30% earlier. So it's roughly in that range, about 20 to 30% of global oil trade, and that's important because oil is a huge a major fossil fuel. That's what they call it, fossil fuel. All right, that fuels what? Energy. All right, fuels energy, fuels transportation. These things are important to an economy. All right. So it says Iran hasn't carried out repeated threats to close it altogether since the 1980s, even during last year's military strikes. All right. It says a sense of regime weakness. Another factor that may convince Trump time to strike is the perceived weakness of Iran's regime after massive protests and damaging Israel's and U.S. strikes last year. Okay, so it says Iran would certainly retaliate, but Israeli and U.S. officials may feel that retaliation would be more limited now than some months or years from now. All right, one reason is that Iran's network of proxies have been depleted by Israel over the past years. Then again, the current situation makes this looming fight existential for the regime, potentially increasing the risk of escalation. All right, and it's not, all these potentials, potentially increasing. It's gonna happen. Okay, it's gonna happen. How do we know that? Because the Lord said it was happen. It was written. It was signed. It was sealed, and it's been delivered into us. And now we see it, manifesting in these current times that we live in, man. Ezekiel chapter 39 and verse 1, it says, therefore, thou son of man, prophesy against Gog and say and say, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. And this is referring to who? All right, Gog is a representation of where Gog was in the ancient world. All right, would be modern day times Russia. Okay, and now what a Gog was basically like a term like Caesar. All right, meaning that it's just the title of an emperor or king of that particular land. So Gog was the chief prince of Meshech and of Tubal. All right, back then. All right, now Agog in this day and era would be who? It would be Putin. Okay. So it says, and lo, I will turn thee back and and it says, and I will leave but a sixth part of thee, and will cause thee to come up from the north parts, and will bring thee up upon the mountains of Israel. So now what this is talking about, it's talking about how the Lord is basically going to put the spirit back on the Russians, all right, the spirit of the Soviet Union, okay? And he's basically going to stir up their anger, all right, against their enemies, which are who? Babylon and Israel, okay? And he's going to leave a sixth part of them, all right, in the actual land of Russia, but the rest of them, all right, meaning 5/6 of them will what? Be brought into that war, okay? And they're going to come up, it says, and I will cause them to come from the north parts, all right, north parts of Russia. It says, and will bring them upon the mountains of Israel. Remember, in the book of Joel, the 3rd chapter, it prophesies of what? All of these nations being brought into the valley of Jehoshaphat, all right, which I went into in one of my other videos, okay? It prophesies of all of these nations being gathered into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and then that's when the Lord is going to return in the midst of World War III, all right? The Lord is going to return in the midst of World War III, and then what's going to happen? All of these nations are going to stop from fighting each other, and they're going to go to fighting what? To fighting Yahweh Shai. Okay? It says, and I will smite thy bow out of thine hand, all right, and I will cause thine arrows to fall out of thy right hand. All right, so what is that? What is that a representation of? It's somebody breaks the bow out of your hand, all right, which is your weapon of war, and they also break the arrows, all right, out of your hand, okay? That represents what? A weakening, okay? The Lord is going to weaken them, okay? And we understand that those arrows really represent, in modern day times, missiles, all right, ICBMs, okay, Tomahawk missiles, all different sorts of nuclear weaponry, all right, and nuclear arsenal. The Lord is going to break that from them because he's going to use them to destroy the enemy, all right, which is, the small hats, all right, chiefly Amalek, okay, doesn't mean that the Lord is with them. All right, that's why it says prophesy also, or that's why we're also prophesying against Gog. All right, it says, thou shalt fall upon the mountains of Israel, all right, thou and all thy bands, all right, and it talks about who those bands are in Ezekiel the 30, Ezekiel the 38th chapter, all right, Talks about Togomar, all right, which is representation of who? Turkey. Okay, so you got Turkey, you got Russia, you have Sudan. It talks about Ethiopia, which is basically Sudan and Ethiopia, modern day Ethiopia. All right, then you got Libya, which is North Africa. Okay, and also Iran, which is what? Persia. All right, they're going to be joint forces together with Russia to come up against Israel in this World War III. Okay, and it says what? And it says, "Thou shalt fall upon the mountains of Israel, thou and all thy bands, and all the people that is with thee. I will give thee unto the ravenous birds of every sort, and to the beasts of the field." So the Lord has promised these beasts of the fields bodies to be devoured. All right. It says, "And of the beasts of the field to be devoured." All right. Their corpse are going to be a feast unto the ravenous birds. "Thou shalt fall upon the open field, for I have spoken it, saith the Lord." All right. "And I will send fire on Magog, and among them that dwell carelessly in the isles, and they shall know that I am the Lord." Okay. So basically, the vision that Ezekiel is seeing right here in Ezekiel, the 39th chapter, is the same thing that Ezra saw in Second Ezra's, what was it, the 13th chapter. All right. But in Ezra's, the 13th chapter, he described more of the part where it talked about the Lord. You know, the description, he said he saw a mountain appear, all right, out of the mist, all right, when really it was a chariot, you know, and he said he saw a man basically neither lift up sword or, you know, any instrument of war, but he only let out of his mouth as it had been a blast of fire. This is describing the same exact event, okay? The nations being gathered in the valley of Jehoshaphat. Joel described the same exact event. Okay, all of the prophets saw the same thing. They saw the same ending. All right, and the ending, all right, was basically the end of our enemies. All right, all of them. Okay, and when the Lord comes back, he's coming back to take the crowns of all these nations, man. Russia, China, Turkey, Iran. All right, all of them are going to be made subjects of, all right, the nation of Israel. Okay, made subject to the nation of Israel. I'll say that. All right, so I will make, it says, "I will send a fire," verse 6. Yeah, I was at verse 6. It says, "I will send a fire on Magog, and among them that dwell carelessly in the isles, and they shall know that I am the Lord. So I will make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel." All right, so now this is talking about what? The people Israel. "And I will not let them pollute my holy name anymore. And the heathen shall know that I am the Lord, the Holy One of Israel." And that's right. So the Lord is going to be exalted, all right, at that time and in that day. Okay, that's literally what is known in the scriptures as what? The dividing of times, all right? The end of Esau and the beginning of Jacob. Okay? It says, "And they that dwell in the cities of Israel shall go forth and shall set on fire and burn the weapons, both the shields and the bucklers and the bows and the arrows and the hand staves and the spears, and they shall burn with fire for 7 years, so that they shall take no wood out of the field, neither cut down any of the forests, for they shall burn the weapons with fire, and they shall spoil those that spoiled them, and rob those that robbed them." All right, thus saith the Lord. Now, this is specifically talking about the people. All right, because you got two things. You got what? You got the actual land of Israel, which is being occupied by Amalek, all right, aka the small hats, all right, the JOOs, whatever you want to call them, the rats. Okay, then you have the actual people of Israel, all right, which are the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, namely those who are of the elect, you know, is who the scriptures is talking about. Okay, so they're going to rob those who robbed them. They're going to spoil those who spoiled them. All right, because remember, at that time we're going to be redeemed in the chariots. All right, and then the Lord is going to allow us to get our revenge. All right, but the scriptures say that what? "Vengeance is mine, thus saith the Lord." So the Lord got to get his first. All right, our big brother got to get his first, and then, all right, he's gonna allow, you know, us to be made fellow heirs with him, and for us to also get our vengeance upon our enemies. All right. So it says, and it shall come to pass in that day that I will give unto Gog a place there of graves in Israel, the valley of the passengers on the east of the sea, and it shall stop the Gnosis of the passengers, and there shall they bury Gog and all his multitude. Okay, it says, and they shall call it the valley of Hamon-Gog. Okay, so that was really the point right there. The main point is that all of the prophets saw the same thing. All right, and we're literally seeing a manifestation of the beginning, all right, of the end. Okay, which is what all of the nations being confederate against Babylon and against Israel. All right, and Israel will be blown off of the map, just as it states here. All right, Israel, the land. All right, it's gonna be devoured, man. Okay, it's gonna be devoured. All right, and all of these nations are basically gonna fall. All right, when Yahweh Shah comes back. So, Lord willing, this was edifying unto the elect. All right, again, this article is 6 reasons the U.S. and Iran are on the brink of war. Okay, so Lord willing, this is edifying unto the elect. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Shem Shai, by Shem Rakak Wadash. I like to say, hey, Shalom.